Dear student, here is the summary of the last lesson. Franz, the narrator of the story, was running late for school one day and was worried about getting a dressing down from his teacher, Mr. Hamel, because he had not learned the rules of French participle like Mr. Hamel had asked them to. As Franz hurried to school, he noticed a crowd in front of the village bulletin board. Since he was already late for school, the Franz did not stop to read the news. When he reached school, Franz couldn't hear the usual bustling sounds heard at the beginning of a school day. The stillness worried Franz even more, as he had hoped to slip in unnoticed in the commotion. Franz entered the classroom embarrassed and afraid, but was surprised when Mr. Hamel kindly asked him to take his seat. It was only after he sat down that Franz noticed that Mr. Hamel was dressed in clothes that he wore only on important days like inspection or prize day. There was a strange solemnness in the air. What surprised Franz even more was the sight of villagers occupying the back benches that would otherwise be empty. As Franz wondered what was happening, Mr. Hamel informed them in a grave tone that this would be their last French lesson. Since Germany took over Alsace and Lorraine after the war, it had been ordered that only German would be taught in school. Franz was shocked by the announcement and realized why the atmosphere was so serious that day. He was filled with regret and wished he had paid more attention to his studies instead of fooling around. His books no longer felt like a nuisance, and he realized he would miss the cranky old Mr. Hamel. Completely unprepared, Franz made several errors as soon as he began and stood there feeling terribly ashamed. Again, instead of scolding Franz, Mr. Hamel spoke about the general tendencies in the village to put off learning. The Prussians could now mock them for not knowing to speak and write their own language. Mr. Hamel went on to say how it was not just Franz's fault. Franz's parents were guilty too, for they preferred that he work on a farm or at a mill than attend the schools.